Hey everyone. In this episode, we want to look at adding an image texture on top of our material. To do this, we're going to have to get a little more complicated with our material editing. In the previous video, we used the material side panel here to adjust the base color and a couple of settings for our two materials on this bottle. For this video, we're going to take a look at the shader node editor. To do that, we're going to go to the shading workspace, which is across the top here. The shading workspace is comprised of several viewports. This top one is a 3D view, and this bottom one is a shader node editor. So let's get to work. In my 3D viewport, I'm going to zoom in on my object that we created last time and put it into local view. Down at the bottom, we see an indication of a slot and a material, and then some squares. These squares are called nodes and represent the operations of our material. If you recall, we created a bottle body material and a bottle cap material. The bottle body material has been placed into slot 1 and the cap into slot 2. You'll see when I select them here, the slot number in the node editor changes. We can also change that by choosing from this dropdown. This is the slot that we want to edit. The image we want to place onto this goes onto the body, so that's going to be slot 1. The first thing you should do when working with nodes is enable the included Blender add-on called Node Wrangler. To do that, go to the Edit menu, go to Preferences, go to the Add-ons menu, and in the search type Node. Make sure Node Wrangler is selected, and then you can exit. To add an image as a texture, click on the Principled BSDF. That's this really large node. This is what represents these settings that we were using before. With that node selected, press Ctrl T. You'll get 3 new nodes added to your node tree. A texture coordinates is a way for Blender to map things onto our object. You can think about the texture coordinates like addresses on our mesh, and these addresses tell the different pieces of information where to go when we place them on our mesh. The mapping node is able to take those addresses, move them around, rotate them, scale them, things like that. Next is the image texture node. This is going to load the actual image, and it takes an input from these coordinates. So these coordinates are going to tell the image how to be mapped onto the object. Finally, that gets piped into the base color of our principled BSDF node. This instructs the renderer how this material is going to interact with light and shadow and those sorts of things. So here in my image texture node, I'm going to click Open. Instead of using the actual label, I've created a sample label to put onto this object. Now you'll see nothing has happened, and we'll see why in just a moment. Currently, the texture coordinates that are being used are called UV coordinates. UV coordinates are a way of unwrapping our object so that we can place a 2D image on a 3D surface. Take this cube for example. In its current state, it would be hard to take an image and wrap it around this object, knowing exactly where the image would end up. However, if we were to make slices along some of the edges, and then unwrap it, something like this, and then draw on this, after we were done, we would be able to just wrap it all back up. And the image would go to each face that it was put on. This is the idea with UV unwrapping. There's a workspace called UV Editing. Let's open that one up. In the UV editor, we can see the 2D representation of our 3D object. If I select all of the vertices of my object, you're not seeing anything there. That means that currently the UV map for this object is probably broken. So what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to create a new UV map. To do that, I'll press the U key and then press Reset. The UV map that's created when you reset is generally unusable. However, if we press U and say Project from View, we'll see that the same layout that we see in our current viewport is projected into our 2D layout. The one thing to look out for with Project from View is that it sees all the way through your mesh. So if there are vertices behind these ones, like in this model, those will get placed exactly at the same spots. So whatever is showing up on the front of your model will also show up on the back of your model. We can change this if we go into top view, select just the vertices on the back of our object like this, and then over in the UV editor, move them over. Now if I select all of my vertices, you'll see that they're split apart, these being the back and these being the front. Let's go back to our shading workspace. Now you can see that we've got at least something on our material, but it's not quite right yet. So let's go back to our UV editor. In the 3D viewport, I'm going to go ahead and change this to material preview mode. And in the UV editor, I can load an image for reference. I'm going to go ahead and load the image that I want for my label. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to select just the back and move it off to the side because I don't want an image on the back of my object. Now I'm going to select the front and I'm going to hit S to scale. And you'll see that it's starting to respond to my image. You will see, however, that we're still getting something on the back. That's because by default, texture images like this repeat, so you can almost think of this image repeating infinitely in all directions. We can change that. Back in our shading workspace, on our image node, you'll see that there's a setting for how the image is extrapolated past its original bounds. It's currently set to repeat. We can set it to extend, which means whatever color data is at the edge of the image will be extended out indefinitely. Now currently, because this was a PNG file with transparency, we're getting the colors of the image, and then anywhere where it was transparent, we're getting pure black. And we didn't want pure black for our color. We wanted it just a little bit lighter. So we're going to have to mix in another color. To do that, we're going to press Shift A in the node editor. Under the input menu, we're going to choose RGB. This is just a simple color. If I drag this color to the base color, it will replace the image. And now using this color wheel, I can change the color of that material. I'll dial this down to the color that I actually want, right about there. Now I need a way to mix these two things together. Pressing Shift A, under color, we have Mix RGB. This node takes two color inputs and then mixes them with some kind of factor. I'm going to connect up both my image and my color, and off the bat, it looks pretty good. However, it's mixing these equally. I want them to be based on the alpha channel of my bitmap. So I'm going to drag the alpha to this factor. Now if I change the color, you'll see that it only affects the parts where the image was transparent. This may seem complicated right out of the gates, and we will be coming back to more detailed instruction on shader editors. But for now, we want to return to our main project. I'm going to go back to my Layout tab and leave Local View. I'm going to get rid of my placeholder, and now I'm going to move this new object up into my scene. Putting my scene into material preview mode, I see my first object, and it looks pretty good. Like I said, we'll be covering shader node editors more in future episodes. This was just a taste of what you can do with a simple texture placed on the front of an object. In our next video, we're going to build out the cabinet underneath the sink. But until then, I hope you're finding this project series helpful, and I hope it inspires you to do something awesome. I'll see you next time.